Welcome to this episode about equalizers. So I have already set up the patch for us and added an equalizer to our plugin chain. However, I think this is not the best visual representation of it in Pigments because you can see the bands here, but you can't see anything behind it. So if I play a note, there's no visual spectrum that tells us how the frequencies look. So let's actually, before we work with this, use this one here because it has the spectrum analyzer, which you can see here. Like, I can just turn it on, so if I play, you can actually see what's happening. You can even see when I play this patch how the filter opens up more and the frequencies travel higher. So first of all, what is an equalizer for? So what you see here is our frequency spectrum from a sound. This is what it looks like visually, all the frequencies. So this here is the bass down here in the lower area. These are the mids and the highs. And they are split into different parts of the sound. So if I bring this up just so you can hear how these different segments sound. This is the low end area. It sounds like this more. If I travel through, so this is just basically highlighting how these frequencies sound like. So if I boost them extremely, you can hear them stronger. There are even equalizer plugins where you can isolate the band that you've picked so that you hear only the sound from what you've chosen. Unfortunately, this one can't, but it's not super important. So the most easiest answer about what an equalizer does is that you can edit frequencies with it. So you can either add frequencies, boost them here, or you can cut them out if you don't like them. And let's actually give us a reason to do so. So let's go back to our patch here and let's introduce elements that will make it sound harsher. So I will add resonance a lot on purpose now. I will open up the filter a little bit, and maybe we can add some wave folder here, which will as well introduce more high end. I believe this will sound terrible now, but not even that super terrible, but it's pretty harsh, right? There's really a lot of this noise in the higher segment. So if I, for example, have a patch like this and I find that this is too harsh on top, what I can do is, first of all, I just grab a band, I make it super small, surgical, and then while I play, I sweep through the frequencies just by dragging and moving it. So trying to find really nasty sounding frequencies. So they all sound nasty, of course, if you boost them this strong, but you need to learn how to distinguish between the ones that are just nasty because you boosted them and those that really sound bad. So those who really sound bad is like this. You hear there's a lot of resonance going on. This is really uncomfortable, not just harsh like the other things, but this here, really introduces some rumble and stuff you don't want to have. So even if you don't hear this really in a basic patch, it's there. We have just detected it with this technique, and we now can see like, I think it's, no, not this one. This is the band. All right, here. So I can now grab it here and just bring it down to the opposite. Or I could probably here just use the invert button. But yeah, you can just then bring it down and make it as small as possible. So really that you're only trying to cut this one frequency out. And by the way, you don't always need to cut like this. Usually if you make cuts, it shouldn't pass -6 decibel. Is like a thumb rule. So you don't always need to listen to this. If you feel like 6 is not enough, if you have to deal with a really harsh frequency, you can even go further. But if you face something like this, I would either say try to fix it in your sound design if it's so brutal that you need to filter it out so hard. But just that you know, as a rule of thumb is around -6 decibels. So this frequency is now tamed a little bit, but we have still this harshness over here, and what we can do here is just a hard cut. Just take a band and show you the extreme here, what it does. So now we hear less of the harshness. This is an extreme example now, of course. You would never go this brutal, right? I just want to show you the effect that you really can hear it. Usually you would be doing something maybe like this. So this is less harsher than before. Compare this without, if I bypass the plugin. And with it turned on. So it only affects this area that is highlighted here. And you could even go more subtle. It must not always be on the peak of -6 decibel. Even 2 or 3 decibel, like we have a gain of -2 here now, can make things better. This is of course now an extreme example. Usually you don't want to filter like half of the frequency like this, right? But this is just an example because this is a pad, and if I'm playing this only in the low range and I want just a little bit of this harshness here, I can go for something like this. And then I could say, hey, I want to boost a little bit here. I want to have more bass, so I can bring it up here a little bit. Now it has more power in the low end because I boost this low end region. Of course this patch sounds terrible now because I really wanted to show you this harshness. It would even sound terrible without the filter here. But just to bring you the concept of an equalizer closer to you, this is how you would work with this. Usually if you do this on your music itself, you will work more subtle and don't do extreme things like this. But regarding sound design, when you create a patch, you can actually do anything you want as long as it sounds good, right? Because you're creating a sound, and whatever gets the job done, gets it done. However, like I said, I would always try to make your patch sound good in the synth itself, and that you don't really need to apply equalizers at all. So they can sometimes be a tool to push something or to smooth something out, but they shouldn't really be your main source of shaping your sound. So let's take something else, like this bass, for instance. And let us bring in the equalizer. I think I will put it in after distortion. And we, like I said, we will be talking later about the chain and why you make specific decisions about the order. So of course we can see again the spectrum here, which I don't like about this parametric EQ. Let me actually turn this off, bypass it, even if it's not in usage now. Just feel better if it doesn't affect anything at all, just in case it does somehow do something. So what you can still do, I mean, it's about your ear, right? It's not about your eyes. So even if you can't see it, you can hear it. So here we'll notice this is a lot of more bass. Of course, this is a push by 11 decibel, way too strong, so you can bring it down to maybe 2, and you will have a little bit more bass. Compare this. Can bring it a little bit more up. Right, so you want to be subtle with this. And then you could say, hey, this is a bass, it's supposed to play in the lower range anyway, I'm not playing it up here, so these notes don't need so much harmonic content up there. Then you can just like, can change the sound. So in this case, what you can do is, again, use this sweeping technique. So you bring a band up, then you go for the Q button, which determines how broad your slope is. So make it really, really, really surgically, and then we can sweep through and identify those nasty frequencies. Here's a little bit of big resonance, but it's not really terrible. And here as well. So you could now say, okay, I want to bring this down, so you just go a little bit down here, and it's a little bit filtered out. But this is more about mixing in whole content. So if you have a full song with a lot of instruments, you maybe wanna try to identify things like this. Usually you don't do it on single instruments. I mean, you can, but usually you do it on groups of instruments, because if you have, let's say, 5 different cello plugins playing, or 5 different synthesizers in a group, and all their frequencies come together, they might be clashing and creating some nasty resonances. And then if you filter on the group with your equalizer, you will find these spots where it clashes. So like I said, on patches itself, I would be really careful with this, and you don't really need to use this a lot. However, you can if you want to really fine-tune stuff like this. Personally, I don't use equalizers on patches because depending on the composition, I will equalize them differently, so it makes no sense to me to equalize them before. But this is how you would use equalizers in a way to improve your quality of sound. For sound design, however, when you create patches, it's not really about making the surgical tiny differences, but it's rather about doing major changes to shape your sound, because we are sound designing now. We are not trying to make a clean mix. So if we say, like I told you earlier, okay, I'm playing down with the bass, we can actually just try to cut some highs because we don't need them. Right? Compare this. So this is darker, it's not so harsh, and we I mean, a part of the mid-area frequencies and high frequencies, they are still part of this bass. They are what makes this bass sound the way it sounds compared to other basses. But it doesn't mean that they need to be super present like this, so I can even bring them a little bit down if I want. And that's fine. So this is a tool to shape my sound in this case. Of course, what you could do, you remember I told you this keyboard thing here, you could of course bring this curve down and then route this keyboard thing to the filter and say, the higher I play, the more close the filter should be. It does the same. Well, no, it doesn't do the same job. That was a wrong thought, but I will explain you why, because if we, let's say, I will show you why. If we bring this to the filter and say, okay, everything I play, let me reset this, let me make a dot in the middle so the lower end is unaffected, and let's say we're doing this, and like, okay, I need to make another dot. So let's say even we go for extreme values like this. So it's true now that the higher notes, they are quieter now, but it doesn't affect the lower notes. This note here has exact the same amount of high-end frequencies than without this curve. Here it sounds exactly the same. There's no change. So this was this thought from my side was not accurate, but I think it's better to explain you why, so you get the concept behind it more. So this is more, with the equalizer, it's more about if you hit a note, no matter what note, you're going to produce frequencies. These. And if I make this equalizer on top, you can see here now, it's here more tamed in this higher region, and the bass is a little bit more boosted. So if I turn this off, it's a little bit more high end, a little bit less bass, but it's more audible with your ears instant, that you can really super strong see it here. But yeah, this is the principle behind this. So only use equalizers if they really, really add something to your sound. And actually, I don't know what... okay, this is basically a wet dry knob. So if you bring this to 0, this thing won't do anything, I guess. Let's try this. Yeah, so this brings the equalizer in. And the reason why they did this is because what you could do now, you could take an LFO and modulate this, and then we have this effect. So you would even hear it stronger if the filter was more open. So let's actually do something more audible. But I'm not impressed by that. I mean, it's an option, but there are so much better things to modulate on the synthesizer that sound way better, have way more impact, and don't mess with your frequency spectrum. Because if you do this here, I show you the equalizer. Okay, it's probably too quick to see, but usually all these things would go up and down. Let's make this slower, maybe then we can see it better. So this makes your sound uncontrollable, because you usually want to have full control over your frequencies. You want to make sure that all your instruments are well laid out in the frequency spectrum. You don't want them to clash. You don't want them to fight for space. And if you do something like this, in the moment where this goes up and all of this gets activated, your balance of your frequencies in your mix is getting interrupted, because this will crash and clash into all your other instruments. So I would actually not make use of this, not modulation wise, except you really find a really good sounding setting when you open and close this here and you're using only one single patch in this moment, like you're just making an intro or a solo part. Then you maybe can justify to do this, but I really wouldn't. And yeah, this is basically what equalizers are for. So unless you really can't do something with them to shape your sound that you can't do with anything else on the sound, on the synth, I wouldn't use them. And as well, I wouldn't try to fix problems with a patch with the equalizer. Rather fix them in your patch itself, because the patch itself is the main source of the sound and should really sound well executed. So what you really can do is, like I told you, if this bass is too bright, we really could just filter out a little bit here. Just a slight change. This is okay, right? Because you have less harshness now. That's pretty fine. Of course, what you could do here is you could say, hey, I'm making the curve steeper. But you're here still pretty bright, because yeah, the curve is now steeper, but the filter opens up when we hit a key. So we will get the full spectrum for a second here, right? Because this is opened. And this still sounds harsh. So this is something that just the equalizer can tame for us. So this is really one of the few moments when you design patches where you could justify to put the equalizer on. But on the other hand, notice that this kills a little bit of the character of the patch, because this is usually the character of the patch. It's made the way that it sounds a little bit harsh, and it's okay if you make a composition and say, hey, I don't want it that harsh. I want it more like this. I'm just saying, be aware that when you cut away frequencies, you are actually taking a part of the character of the instrument away, and the more you cut, the more the instrument becomes more dull and even less characteristic. And again, if you boost as well, you need to be careful, because if you boost too much, then you can even again introduce frequencies that you didn't want to have in your patch, and then they may interfere with other instruments. So just keep that in mind when you use equalizers at all. I would, like I said, just use them gentle to cut off sometimes things, if you really know that a patch has this purpose, because this is a bass now, and you really know you will always play it in the lower register, so it's not that bad if the higher frequencies are cut off. But if you play a plugged patch like this, and you know it's something that you might want to play here, then this beautiful brightness up there is what makes this patch sound good. However, in this case, if the low end is too strong, so let's bring this in here. Right now we have really a lot of low end. And let's say you're playing with this instrument now low notes, because that's how your musical piece is set up. Then you could say, okay, let's just take this one for this purpose. Just take an equalizer and tame a little bit of the low end so it doesn't rumble so much and doesn't crash with the bass. Right? This is just a little low cut here. It's only taking 4 decibels away at 50 Hertz, and here already only 1.6, so this is even pretty much inaudible. So it really just cuts on this big chunk here, what makes it less rumbling. But this again is more in the, we are talking already about mixing your music here, and not really about sound design in your synth in the patch. So like I said, I would not put it on, because it matters how you play our instrument and where you play it. So even if this patch had this much low end, I wouldn't go on with an equalizer. You as sound designer, you will make this choice from the right beginning. So if you say this has too much low end for me, then simply take it off. Right? There's no point in bringing this in and then filter it out. I just wanted to show you that if you play maybe with patches from someone else, or you're in your composition and an instrument has too much low end and you maybe can't just tweak it easily like this, then you can go in with the equalizer and take care of this. Just so you know the general purpose of an equalizer, because equalizers are way more important for stuff like this rather than for sound design. So this lesson here is a little bit about musical composition and your whole mix, and less about creating patches on a synthesizer. But no, I hope you get the concept clear now, and you know the differences in the ways you can use them. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see us in the next one, and we will be talking about compression.